Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed and we are reading the Phaedo. Okay, this is our second stream, maybe. We've had one or two on the Phaedo already. So today what we're going to do is go through what we've read already of the story and recap that and take notes on all of the big puzzles that came up. We recognized from our use of the logos, right? We've been learning about the logos, what that is, and part of the logos is pulling out from the text that we read key terms, looking for patterns, looking for structure, looking for hierarchical order, and specifically looking for questions. Plato is written in such a way where there are questions, but they're not explicit. The questions are hidden. We have to discover the questions and then discover the answer. It's like a Christopher Nolan movie, right? There are questions that are on the surface that we can see, easy to see in the narrative, but then there are hidden questions that you won't know is there until you discover them. Why is that important? Well, when we discover the questions for ourselves, they become ours. They're more meaningful to us. They're more interesting to us. Just like a video game. We gotta solve the puzzles and discover the puzzles that are hidden. Look for things that stand out. Look for key terms that stand out. Oh, no, thumbs up. Look for key terms that stand out. Just like in a video game, you might notice a lamp that's in the wrong place. Or a hole in a painting and the other hole has a crystal in it and there's missing one crystal. You can discover, oh, there's something there to be discovered. Similarly, this is how Plato writes. There are questions and puzzles to be discovered. We look for things that seem out of place. We look for things that are significant key terms. We look for patterns and structure. And we apply our skill tree. What's our skill tree? Our skill trees are things that we carry with us that are sets. That are sets of 2s or 3s or 4s or even 5s. Patterns. Triads are a big one, of course. We went through triads last time. Triads was a good way of understanding why we're getting into this text. We have to level up ourselves in a triadic way in philosophy, and that will also help us in our reading of the Parmenides, which is a intense work. And to understand the way that we're leveling up, we talked about the triad of the logos, the anti-logos, and mythology in between. The logos leads us to our destiny. The anti-logos or pathologos leads us to our fate. That's our terrible disasters, our repeating cycles of patterns in our life that are negative and limit us from reaching our highest goals. And in between is mythology. Stories that can represent the patterns, order, structure of both. Keep in mind, the pathologos or anti-logos is the logos. It just has it's its shadow. So it has a similar structure, similar terms, but it's distorted reflection. Right? The vice is simply the image of virtue. Reflected into a lesser dimension, you could say. In a similar way, if you hold up your left hand to a mirror, the mirror image holds up its right hand. It's fundamentally wrong. It's kind of like that. So we want to know the logos and we want to understand the anti-logos or the pathologos so we can remove our problems. Problems are those things that arise in the pursuit of philosophy to block us from that. Why? Because problems arise by their nature as we pursue our most meaningful goals. Our most meaningful or beautiful goals. Right? Famously, you're in the presence of a really beautiful person. You can get nervous. Your blocks come up. The patterns that you're embarrassed about seem to come up when you're the more beautiful the person you are around, or the more important the goal is. The more likely those repeating patterns and negative feeling states come up to block us. Right? And if it's repeating, if it can be understood, if it comes up at the same sorts of times, if there's a common theme, we can recognize there's something intelligent there. There's something that we can understand there. It's not random. We're not living in a random world, and equally so, our problems are not random. There is a pattern there. Our quest is to understand that pattern and then apply that understanding to removing what is negative. And fortunately for us, it's the same pattern that applies to the positive. The same logos applies to both the positive and the negative, and the dialectic, which is the power of the logos, also applies to both. Wow.
Wow.
No, wow.
Wow.
Wow. Okay. And also we talked about how the Phaedo is talking about the soul, and specifically death and dying. One of the questions that came up at the beginning of this text already is, how did Socrates die? What was his self-death like? We recognize the word self has an honorific meaning in the Greek. So did he have a self-death? Can we have a self-death? And if there is a self-death, what does that mean about our soul? Phaedo, who's telling the story, talks about how he feels that Socrates will fare well in the next life, in Hades, and he will still have providence. He'll still have his connection to providence even there. So that's something that we want. We want to be connected to providence here and fare well here, but also wherever we're going next. Right? So another triad is the triad of rational questions. The questions that you would rationally ask wherever you find yourself. If you wake up on another planet, if you start a new video game, if you become a human alive on this planet here, there are three fundamental questions we would ask that would be the rational ones to ask. Where do we come from? Where am I going? And what should I be doing while I'm here? Understand where we're going, especially, is very important to understand what we should be doing while we're here. And if this text is showing us where we're going, we can take something with us that we might need, such as providence, a connection to providence, some sort of ability to do well where we're going. Then that might be an answer to that question. What should we be doing while we're here? Another triad is the soul. Right? We're going to be learning about the soul because that's related to death, of course, separating the soul from the body. But what is the soul? Well, we're coming in with a hypothesis of the soul as three parts that we can all recognize within ourselves. Within ourselves, we have a psychic force or desire for our inward needs. An inward desire to eat a sandwich, to take into your body a nice sandwich when you're hungry. There's an outward desire. There's something that motivates us to move in the world. Outward moving force. And for both, there is a planning force, a reasoning, thinking, planning that can make plans for both. What sort of sandwich are you going to eat? Where are you going to go today? So these three psychic forces we can group together and give a word, soul. Right? As a way of understanding those forces. At least as a hypothesis as we get into the text. So with that in mind, we're looking for triads. We're looking for patterns. We're looking for key terms. We're looking for things that stand out. We're looking for things that are weird. We're also looking for repetition. That's a pattern. Are there any words that repeat themselves? Are there any triads of key terms That's probably significant. And of course, we have a question: how does the opening part reflect the whole? Is there a hierarchical order in even how the book is written? Okay, so with that in mind, let's jump into the text and go through what we've seen already to pull out those key questions and write them down so we can carry them with them as we proceed forward. Lots of fun. Here's our text. We've already got some things highlighted, thankfully. Oh, here's the opening. Phaedon or Phaedo. Either one works. Okay, now you might notice things in the text that stand out for you that you can take with you as questions as well. I encourage you to do so. If you would like to share them in the chat, that'd be great. So we can all benefit from sharing in your logos and your seeing. Was self present with Socrates on that day? Already there's the big question: what's the significance of the first word, which is self? Autos. Autos, O Phaedon, present with Socrates on that day? Okay, so let's start with that. Here's our board. This is the wrong one. Let's bring up our notes on the Phaedo. Here's our Zelda Triforce, which is a mythological representation that if we add our own logos in seeing too, we can make it better if we wanted to. Key terms: the self triad, the one self, self mind, and self logos. Questions about Phaedo. We're using the logos to separate from the full. That's a bit of a spoiler. Sharing in the logos. Isn't it wonderful that we can? As a state of mind we want to take with us as we go. This is us as the adventurer. Our key terms: looking for patterns, developing hypotheses, questions, 4 big sacks there. We seek excellence, that's what makes us a philosopher. Have our skill trees, and we do see it wherever we can. And of course we touched on the idea of changing the words selfish and selfless, a distorted language about the self, replacing it with self-full. Okay, so self-full is win-win. When you're full, when your self needs are met, you overflow. You're more likely to want to benefit others, help others, or share your seeing with others who are also adventurers. Notice, without knowing what's the good, the true good, your ability to help others might be limited. In other words, our ability to meet our self-goals and know thyself, using the self-logos, passing through self-mind or being, but also help others. So this idea of a duality of helping others or helping yourself, based on the idea of participate. You take a part so there's less for other people. That language has to go. helpful, win-win, happy people. Okay, let's jump into the text. We have to start making our notes, and so let's start here. Phaedo notes or Phaedo questions. One, self as first word. Why? He drank the potion, or did you hear it from another person? Okay, another question. What's the significance of hearing or experiencing something important yourself? He was there himself. He heard it himself. He took part and he participated in what? Experiencing yourself, or participating or sharing yourself. Sharing in what's important. Yourself. Okay. Self. Oh, sorry. He can answer with one word. Isn't that cool? What was the kind of logos the man smoked prior to his death? How did he meet his end? I would like to hear this. Okay, so we want two things. Whoops. Two things. We're after the logos prior to death. So these are promises that the text... Whoa, wrong screen. I was up in space for a minute. These are questions that the texts are giving us, the promises. For it to be a good text, it should be answered. They're IOUs. So we want to... the text is promising us the kind of logos he spoke before his death and how he died. How he died. Neither does any of the citizens from Philus visit Athens nowadays, nor has any visitor come there for a long time who give a clear report of what happened. Okay, so what's the significance of no visitors and no clear reports? No visitors from Philus to Athens. And why can no one give a clear report? Why? We're getting a clear report from Phaedo, aren't we? I hope so. Did you not hear the news about the way in which the trial took place? Okay, that's a reference to the apology. It's another text we'll get into later, maybe. Yes, someone did bring news to us about that, but we wondered indeed that self took place a long time ago. Yet it appears he was put to death much later. Why was that the case? There was a delay. Okay, that's a question. Why was there a delay? Self came together by a certain destiny, for it so happened, okay? Keyword standing out, destiny. It's a big one. What the heck is destiny? These guys must know about it. If they're just using it like that, willy-nilly in their conversation. So for us, we have a question. What the heck is destiny? What is destiny? Just adding some color to our notes. Self as the first word. Experiencing or sharing in it yourself. Why is that important? And we have the Logos prior to his death, how he died. No visitors. What's the significance of that? Whoops. The significance of there being no visitors. What's the significance of there being a clear report? Whoops. Giving the clear report of something significant or important for us. Jumping in. The day before the trial, the stern of the ship that the Athenians sent to Delos was crowned with garlands. What ship is this? The ship that the Athenians say in which Theseus, a myth, once departed taking 2 groups of 7 to Crete, and both selves were saved and self was saved. Okay. So, we have a math problem. You ever played a game and you notice that there are, 7 statues on one side, but 6 on the other? You think, oh, okay, there's something we've got to do here. This is a math puzzle. We've got to find the other statue. So, 2 groups of 7. And how would you save self? What does it mean to save self? Oh, I should bring up the text and notes. Okay, 2 times 7 is here. And what does it mean to save self and selves? In what way did he save them? How did Theseus in the myth save them? And as we've been talking about, as mythology is one of the 3 parts of philosophy or the human quest, the spiritual path, the enlightenment method, whatever you want to call it, all names like that fit. The 3 parts, one of the parts is the Logos up, the other one is understanding and removing problems, which is the Logos applied to our blocks. But the middle term, the third, is, of course, mythology. And if it's mythology, then we want to know, how does mythology serve either or both of those two purposes? In other words, are we just making myths to communicate, I don't know, how kids should eat their vegetables? Or are we using myths in this kind of a way? In which case, can we understand the Theseus myth in a way that somehow saves self and selves, but not in the literal? The story would have no meaning if it was a literal thing, because it's nonsense. There was no Theseus. I don't think so. But if it's a metaphor or a myth allegory, then we can use that to understand the truth, our path, and our path is philosophy. So, for us, self and selves are significant. So just dropping that in. Oh, by the way, self and selves are savable and were saved. That's a big deal for us. So they vowed then to Apollo. Okay, that's a big one. And we did some work. We did a little side mission last time on Apollo. They vowed to Apollo, as the story goes, that if they were saved, to bring about a mission to Delos every year. This has been so, and even now they send forth a mission such as this to the god. Surely then, selves have a law to keep the city pure during this time. Already, okay, I've got 3 questions. Apollo, annual, repetition, the god? This could be a question. I'm not sure. This could just be referencing the god, or it could be some significance with the use of the word the. We already recognize the word the in philosophy is significant. It elevates a particular to the ideal. Or rather an adjective to a substantive. A beautiful person to the beauty itself. So let's throw in those 2 we got. 9. Apollo? What's he mean? And 10. Repeating. The journey. To Delos. So what's the significance of that? Apollo. Give that a color. And repeating. What's the significance of the repetition? This will be handy to have. We're building our question sack together, right? A question sack reference to the adventurer. To be a philosophical adventurer, we have our own kind of inventory that we take with us here. Key terms, hypotheses, ifs, look for patterns in order, and also we carry a sack of questions with us. And the text itself is written in a way to give us things. Questions, promises, IOUs at the beginning. So if we go through the text and there are a bunch of IOUs at the beginning, questions in the beginning that are not answered, then we say, holy crap, it's a poorly written text. And we can write a nasty email to the publishing company of Plato and to Plato himself and say, hey, learn to write, you fool. You say, hey, you jabroni, learn to make a good book. You make promises at the beginning, but they're not solved within the text itself. We'll say that to Plato if it's not. Or if it is solved, we'll be happy. And we'll do this. Surely then, selves have a law to keep. So law is significant, of course, in philosophy. If you're into the Republic, you recognize the significance of laws as a metaphor for fundamental principles we have to adhere to in our own lives to balance our own soul. Right? The Republic is about how to order the soul. And they talk a lot about laws in the beginning of the Republic. But we're not in the Republic, so we'll keep going. Keep the city pure, and during this time, once the mission has started, no one may be executed by democratic consent until the ship has made its journey to Delos and returned here. So we've got a couple of ideas. We've got purity, purification. We got no one may be executed. And we've got democratic consent. What's the significance of that? Until the ship has made its journey and returned. The idea of returning. Maybe this democratic consent I'll put in a different color, just in case. Because it might be a democratic consent in that was the votes were taken at the end of Socrates' trial. This sometimes takes a long time, whether the winds may happen to delay selves. Okay. Another one there. Winds delaying selves. Therefore, the beginning of the mission starts when the priest of Apollo crowns the stern of the ship. We've already got a question about Apollo. And this happens, as I say, the day before the trial took place. Because of this, Socrates remained a long time in prison between the trial and his death. Okay, this idea of time again. Repetition. We want this to be yellow. Time. Time, of course, one of the sulfur terms in the first hypothesis, if you came along with us on that series. So time as one of the key terms. And we have a question from that as well. What's the sulfur pair to the idea of time? So, purity. No one dying. Or do not execute. No execution. The idea of returning. The winds delaying selves. Let's write those down. So, the idea of remaining pure, the idea of no executions, the idea of returning or until returning. And winds that delay selves, and of course the idea of time repeating itself. So, pure is a question we have. What's the significance of remaining pure? What's the significance of no executions? Oh. Returning. What's the significance of delaying selves. And of course, time. So, and right now we're taking our time, aren't we? We are doing ourselves as a kind of repeating, a kind of reflecting, repeating on what we've read, and we're taking the time to really nail down for ourselves the questions, that we have them with us, with the promise that they will pay off. Hey, when you're watching a film, take notice of what happens at the beginning. If it's a good film, it'll pay off. What then? But then, what about the details pertaining to his self-death, okay? Self-death, that stands out to us. Self-death. Some sort of significant death or honorific kind of death. What were his logos and deeds, and who were... What were his logos and deeds? What were the logos and deeds, and who were present of the followers of the man? Or did the authorities not allow them to be present? In being present, so that he met his end bereft of friends. So he asked a few questions there. So it's interesting. We're looking for questions, and our friend Socrates, who kicked off. He is the priest adorning the ship with his garlands of questions. Just as the priest of Apollo, the priest of philosophy, put the garlands on the ship for its journey, its yearly return to Delos, to symbolize a purification in a way that can save self and selves. We have an idea in our mind already from the Parmenides that selves refer to the beings. That was Zeno's dialectic, and self refers to the one beyond even being. That was Parmenides' dialectic. So we have the idea of self-death, and then we have logos and deeds and friends. So is that a 3? Is that a 2? Logos and deeds seem like a pair. Friends. So we've got self-death, logos and deeds. Is that a triad? Or maybe with friends, it's a quadrad. If we have 2 options, what do? We take both. So first of all, self-death was on its own. Self. Death? What the heck is that? And logos. Deeds. Equals duad. Or logos, deeds, self-death. Is that a triad? The more we can populate our skill trees, the better. And our skill trees are patterns of 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s. If you fancy a 6. If you're really fancy, maybe you can squeeze a 7 in there. Logos. Let's get rid of this. Looks like a minus. Logos plus deeds plus self-death plus friends. Equals quadrad? Now, is quadrad the right word? Quartet. Tetrad. Tetrad. There we go. Tetrad. Sounds better than a quadrad. Tetrad, pentad, hexad, heptad, octad, nonad, and decad. Or quartet. I think tetrad is one we're after. Let's go with that. Tetrad. Triad and duad. Cool. We are really taking our time on this, as we should at the beginning. In no way was the authorities preventing him from being with his friends, for some were present, and many more indeed. Oh, so friends and non-friends, that's interesting. Please be willing to relate to us all these details as clearly as possible, okay? This is another question, but it's more fuel on our previous question, giving a clear account. He wants a clear account. So we can go back to, what does he say? He says, relate details as clearly as possible. So here we could add clear report. We'll add to this Phaedo asked to give details clearly as clearly as possible. It's number 5. Significance of giving a clear report. If you do not happen to be occupied with something else. Ha 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 ha. What's better to do than to understand the last logos and deeds, the culmination of a life of philosophy from the greatest philosopher, what we even now call the father of Western thought. But of course, that's because we don't recognize that it's not just thought, it's not just intellect, it's intelligible. There's a mystical element, there's an experiential, hey, logos and deeds. And also a self-death. That's part of it. It's not just the father of Western thought, it's a father of how to die well, self-death. And also friends, how to relate best to your friends. That's the tetrad. Logos, deeds, self-death, and friends. So asking if he had something better to do, that's a funny joke for us. I do indeed have the leisure, and I will attempt to tell in detail. Okay, again, detail. Repetition. 3 times we've talked about detail. And since it is always the greatest pleasure to remember Socrates, okay? So, that's a promise. Explain to us, please, this idea of the number 18. Please explain, sir, the idea of the greatest pleasure. What's that? I'd like to know that, please. You also put the remembering here. Put the remember. Why did he say the greatest pleasure was? That leads into this one. Remembering. Why is that the greatest pleasure? Remembering. Make it a different color. By talking about self with myself and listening to someone else. Okay, so we see the logos and self. So why is the greatest pleasure talking about self both myself and from someone else? Oh, didn't see that. Talking about self, myself, and from someone else. Question 20. Truly then, you indeed have hearers such as these, O Phaedo. So would you attempt to tell us every detail as exactly as thou possibly can? Again, 4th time this has been mentioned. Clarity, accuracy. For me at least, being present, this is highlighted by our translator, was truly a wonderful experience. Okay, this is, again, being present has been repeated. Were you present there? Who was present there? Were his friends present there? Opening sentence, present, okay. As it is in the opening sentence, we should really make it a question. So what is the significance of being present? Being present. It was a wonderful experience. Is that a question? I think maybe. I think in the same way we have logos, deeds, self-death, and friends, a tetrad related, greatest pleasure is to do with remembering. And also that is related to talking about self. Yourself or with someone else, with a friend. 22. Wonderful experience. What about being present is a wonderful experience. Experience. Being present at the death of that man, I did not feel pity as expected for the man. He appeared like a good daemon. Okay, there's a bunch of questions, and now he's starting to describe. So maybe we can start to take notes about what's being said. A great daemon. And he appeared like a great daemon, both in disposition and logos. There's two, disposition and logos. And as such, he met his end fearlessly and nobly. It occurred to me that neither in the place of Hades, where he was going to be without divine providence, but there he would also fare well upon arriving, if anyone ever had. Another two. So, meeting one's end fearlessly and nobly, not nobly, nobly, leads to having divine providence. So he's not without, so we take out the not. That's one of the tricks. If you want to give an easy puzzle, just add a not in there. So you have to take the not and replace it with what it is. So not without divine providence is the same as saying with divine providence. And also, he will fare well. If anyone ever had. So that's best of all people. To fare well, if anyone ever had, it's going to be him. So he's saying, of everybody, this guy would fare the best. So, that's an interesting triad here. Why do we call it a triad? Well, we've been talking a lot about triads. That's been our good friend for this talk so far. And a triad has a ruling term, which is also the emanating term. That rules or creates from it its next two. So here, because he was a great daemon, he had a good state of mind and logos. Because he was able to a ruling or emanate. Okay, so we can see this is our the ruling or emanating term in the triad. Meeting his death fearlessly and nobly means he can be with divine providence and he will function well. Equally so, he'll have a good disposition and logos. Now, what's the significance of taking these notes and recognize, oh my god, it's a triad? Well, first of all, we can say it can go into our skill tree. That's our threes. Oops. Our threes skill tree. But what's the significance about having a skill tree? Well, you can connect the branches together. So let's take one of these and see if we can do it. Good daemon, disposition, and logos. Are there any skill trees that we've got already, that we've even talked about, that has one or two of the same terms or similar terms to help better understand this triad here? Let's look. Being, power, and activity. Interesting. So we can ask the question. We can ask some questions here. We can create some questions for our question stack, and we can create some hypotheses as well. Does the self-death put you in a state of being, and his dispositional state of mind is the power, and the logos is the activity? Well, he did have the activity of the logos. That's a tick. State of mind, does that give you a power? Yeah, I think so. That's also the Vivek term. If you're in a good state of mind, you have more power to do things. I think so. Which would mean, can we understand the top of this triad? Oh, sorry, it wasn't self-death. That's a different triad. We've got this one here. Oh, okay. So we can connect it with this triad as well. Great daemon. Is a great daemon the ultimate state of being? So we can ask that question. Considering this is a kind of power, this is a kind of activity. So maybe the state of a good power is how much you are like a great daemon. Interesting hypothesis, right? We also have a question a triad over here. Logos, deeds, and self-death. Okay. Common term. This is called abduction. It's a way of solving puzzles. So like the example we worked with in the Parmenides was if you are a teacher, or if you want to create a puzzle to be found for a video game, you show that there are 1, 2, 3, 4 things in this set. So set 1. And then you give them a set 2. 1, 2, and then you leave the rest out. Oh, there are 4 statues in this room that are lined up, but in the next room there are only 2. Maybe these 2 are missing. There are 4 gems in those sockets, but only 2 in this doorway, or whatever it is. Okay, so another way of explaining that would be with a analogy. So you could say so set 1 is the lower set. So a shepherd is to his sheep, is to his tent that he sleeps in, is to his cart that he rides in. As a king is to his people, subjects. And then you stop. Now, you could start by saying, oh, well, that's interesting. So this author or this person or this teacher is helping me understand what it means to be a king and how to relate to the subjects by pointing to a metaphor of how a shepherd relates to his sheep. So these are the terms this means relate to. Great. And you walk out of the door and you're happy. You've learned something about what it means to be a king. But if you recognize that in the first set there were a couple of extra terms missing, you fill them out yourself. Oh, castle. Right, and there's another one here. What's the cart? What would be a cart? Cart is to a shepherd as what is to a king. Okay, so in a similar way, we can recognize we've got these 3 terms in this set 1, and we look for a triad that has a similar term. And here we've got one. Logos. So we've got a triad. Logos, deeds, self-death. So Logos is here. Is being a great daemon deeds? Or is being a great daemon something that comes from having self-death? Interesting. Does having a self-death lead to the ideal disposition? Well, notably, and sort of well known, that people who have near-death experiences almost universally talk about how they overcome a fear of death from that experience that puts them into a better state of mind from which they can live their life. People who have near-death experiences or separate their soul from the body, like a self-death, and come back, have a different disposition, a new way of approaching life, a new state of mind, often characterized by no longer fearing the death experience because they've experienced it themselves. Which can tie into our question, what's the significance of experiencing it yourself? Question 2. So the significance of having these skill trees and these triads and these questions allows us to get our sewing needle of infinite truths. That's a weapon that we discovered in the Parmenides. It's a weapon that we have at our disposal. We can use this, the sewing needle of infinite truths, snit, to weave together things that we've pulled out from the text, which is what we're doing now. So, can we weave that triad together? Do we need to experience for ourselves the self-death to be in the best state of mind? Interesting. Or do we need to experience for ourselves the self-death, die in the highest way so that we can become a great daemon ourselves? Now, the idea of daemon is something that was referred to in the text when he said, by the way, were you there at the trial? And it's been a bit of time since the trial and his execution. So what happened at the trial was, we haven't read the text yet in this series, but the reason Socrates is in jail, about to be put to death himself, is because of the daemon. Or rather, because of the state not liking that Socrates has a communication with his daemon, like his guardian spirit that guides him. Socrates famously says, it doesn't tell me what to do, but it does speak up when I'm about to do something I shouldn't. Also, the word happy is related to good daemon in the etymology of the word in ancient Greek and how the word was made. So, Socrates said, yeah, I have a daemon that communicates with me. And how would a daemon or a spirit communicate with us? Well, it helps him. It lets him know when he's going to do something that's going to be not beneficial to him. So he's acting divine providence. A daemon is that which communicates the divine providence to us. Oh, good thing we dropped in this word. So, is this connected? Could this triad be the beginning of this triad? Because in our metaphysics, the top of the triad is the lowest term in the next triad. It's called hyparxis. So if by having good words and developing a good state of mind, you can become like a good daemon, as Socrates was like a good daemon. What does a daemon do? It functions with divine providence. Does that enter you into this realm where if you function in your life as a good daemon with divine providence, you can live your life well and you can meet your end fearlessly and nobly? Another question. This is the significance of having a skill tree. These are all threes. So, great daemon, disposition, and logos. What other triads do we have at our disposal already we can play with? Using our snit. Snit is sewing needle of infinite truths. It's like a weapon. The great sword of infinite truth is a famous Warcraft weapon. We have a sewing needle that we can sew ideas together from the text. Okay, so what else do we have? Oh, here we go. Here's another triad. And it's a triad that has our term. So what do we have in our other one? We had logos, disposition, and self. What was it? Great daemon. So, messy. This one is the same. So self logos, would that be if this is by the way, this is the self-er triad, the ideal. So logos is the same. Okay, so the ideal of the logos, if Socrates had a good logos at the end of his life, we can see, does he have the self logos? Good disposition, self mind. Oh, disposition is another way of saying state of mind. So we have two terms that fit. Remember what happens when we have two terms that fit, but enough to establish a pattern, which means, where is our thing? We can create a hypothesis like this. This two terms that match, fill out the rest. Philosophical abduction. Deduction is when you have all of the principles and you can do deduction. This must be true if you have the higher principle. Induction is like science. You only have examples and you don't know the higher principle and you induce or theorize what the higher must be. Abduction is when you have a little bit of both. You have this from one, this from another. So this would be the higher, this is the lower. But you have enough to establish a principle, but you may be missing this term. Maybe you're given this term, king is to subject, as question mark is to what does the king have? A throne. So maybe this is missing. So you have some of this, some of that. That's what abduction means. So deduction is top down, D for down. Induction is you induce a theory, like in physical science. And abduction is when you have a bit of both, enough to establish a pattern, and you can fill out either set. Okay. We call this abduction. Or philosophical abduction. Cool. So right. So we have another self triad, and we've got two. Self logos and the one self. So this is the self triad, of course, of the... Actually, it should be the other way around, shouldn't it? The yellow should be the one. The. Notice the, not a one, like one apple. The one. And the first hypothesis of Parmenides, his hypothesis of himself, from himself, was the one self. So, that's why we call it the self-o triad. The one self is the first hypothesis, self-mind is the second, self-logos. Well, we haven't got past the second yet, but this is the, if the self exists, and we recognize that if it exists, it has to exist in its ousia, self-ousia. Another word for ousia is pure mind. So we could recognize, oh, the ideal disposition or state of mind is the self-mind of the one that exists in the second hypothesis that we're going to return to after the Phaedo. Metaphysics, by the way, that's the realm of being. The one self was the first hypothesis. So, logos, disposition, and great daemon. So this opens up another question. What would it be like to have reached the one self, the ultimate? Would it be like a great daemon? And if that's the case, if Socrates starts his philosophical journey with Parmenides and he says, by the way, this is your problem. You're using a language of the physical world. You need to develop a language of the realm of being, of ousia. That's Zeno's dialectic. Those exercises, practice those. We did a lot of work in our previous series on unpacking and figuring out the patterns and structure of the dialectic. And that happened to have given us a very handy pattern, a duad, if it is, if it isn't, and a tetrad or a quadrad of 4 that helped us to see other things as well. So we had to do some work to figure out the structure of the dialectic so we could do it. But Parmenides says, hey, you need to go, and a lot of us are in that position ourselves. We grow up and all we hear about is the physical world. All we're told to pursue is material things. That's all the things that have value. Therefore, what happens when you die? Nothing. You're worm food, from dust to dust. So there's no possibility of a self-death. There's not even a possibility of higher states of mind. We vaguely refer to being happier, and sometimes people have insights, and sometimes athletes get in the zone. Sometimes there are traditions based on higher states of mind, like the ideal of the samurai. MMA fighters talk a lot about being in that state, where you can act spontaneously and perfectly, and how important it is in the cage. But generally speaking, we're just in the physical world. We're not really taught about this realm, or this one. And that's where Socrates started, so we can relate to him in the Parmenides. So if he meets the Parmenides and he says, by the way, kid, that's your problem. And also, one of the reasons why you're stuck at your problem is, we have this great quote from Parmenides that we put out last time. You're still young and you care about the opinions of human beings. And by the way, Zeno chimes in and says, the many are ignorant that without the dialectic, through the beings, it happens to be impossible for your intellect to hold on to the truth. You have a lot of quotes like that. So if that's where he starts, our question is, how did it affect him? Did Socrates being present for the logos of Parmenides and his deeds talking to him and talking to Aristotle in the Parmenides work? Did it have a providential effect on him? By the way, providence should be in one of our questions. What is destiny? As one of them, but also what is providence? You can't just drop the word providence on our asses and then not define it. So that's a kind of kind of question. What is providence? That's a promise. So if that's where Socrates was when he was beginning his journey, and now we're all the way at the end of the story, we jump to the end of the book. How did it go? How did he go? Well, Phaedo is saying, you know what? Out of all the men I've ever seen, this guy's going to do best where he's going. Remember the triad of questions we have to ask? Where do we come from? What should we be doing while we're here? Where are we going? Well, wherever we're going, he's going to go there well, apparently, according to Phaedo. So what did he do in the meantime? Because we are going to pass on to the next world. What's going to happen to us, and how can we fare well, and how can we keep a connection, have and maintain a connection with divine providence wherever we're going? If we had that, we might not be afraid or lost wherever we're going. So that's our middle question. What should we be doing in the meantime, in the present? We had the word present repeating. So where did we come from was our past. Where we're going is our future. What should we be doing in the present? And Phaedo is saying, by the way, I'm spending my present having a dialogue with you, talking about the self. What was it? Write it down, thankfully. I am going to take great pleasure in remembering Socrates, which is what we're doing, and we're talking about the self, myself and with others. That's exactly what we're doing, these three here. So maybe that is a bit of a clue how we should be spending our present. Because in the future, we'll be going to the next world. In the past, we would have had a reason to be here. Okay? So we have some time. One of the key words that we've been reading is time. Time. We don't die straight away in the story. We have to take time for the ship to go to Delos and come back repeatedly every year. Why? To purify in honoring what God? The God of philosophy. So in the time that we have in our present, by the way, if where we're going to or where we're coming from is outside of time, because it's not in the physical world, it's the world of the soul, then maybe only here we can do that purification. How do we purify ourselves? By going back repeatedly, returning repeatedly. What is the repeating the journey to Delos right here? In order to purify ourselves by sharing in what? Apollo, philosophy. So maybe the present should be a continual returning to purify ourselves in that time between our birth and our death, as Socrates is doing right now in the present. Maybe that's a good hypothesis we can throw in our sack. And as such, let's go back to our triad. This one. Socrates at the start of his life, in the time at the beginning, when he was first adorned with the garland from Parmenides, said, "Kid, you need to learn the self-logos." And that's the power of the self-logos is the dialectic. Master that. And you need to apply it to all of the ideas in being. Socrates came in with a question, what is the idea of likeness itself and one and many itself, and not in the physical world, but as the idea? Okay, so master the self-logos. Apply it to self-mind or being or ousia. And that's a preparation, he said, for the one self. We have a quote, we'll throw up a quote, why not? That brings those two together. Three together. Here we go. Falls to the ability of an individual of a good natural disposition to be able to what? Learn that there's a certain kind of each idea in self-mind, and that of self-ousia, according to self. That's the nature of self-mind, ousia. And they will deserve even greater admiration who, having made the discovery, shall help others. Okay, well, shall teach others to how to do this themselves. Okay, that's not the quote we're after. Get this one here. Permit the ideas of real beings to be. Okay, that's mind, self-mind, being. Keep your mind fixed on the objections. They're the counterattacks we're trying to purify ourselves from, and others like them. 2, define each one of the particular ideas in self-mind, the self-ousia ideas. That's where we use our understanding, our, in the Greek, dianoia, which is the logos through the dialectic. That's understanding. And we have to finally allow each idea of one of the real beings to be of the self. This is the power of dialectics. Okay, that's all the parts together. Socrates, you need to what? You need to what?
What? What?
You need to master the self-logos and the dialectic. Apply it to self-mind. That's Zeno's exercise. As a preparation for the oneself. Hey, keep in mind that all of those ideas, beauty, justice, oneness, goodness, manyness, infinity, limit, whole, part, time being one of them, are all of boom, 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 boom. The self. So, and then Socrates said, hey, by the way, I'm confused. That sounds complicated. Can you give me an example of the dialectic? Didn't pick any of those ones. Didn't pick a dialectic on justice or beauty or any of Zeno's ones. He picked this guy here, thankfully, giving us the first hypothesis. So, if Socrates got the first hypothesis, got told to master this, apply it to this at the start of his life, did it work? Did he spend his present, his time between birth and death in a way that it worked? That's our question. One of the many questions we have about Socrates that we take with us into this text. So, that's that self-triad. Let's use our skill tree and apply it to another triad skill tree and see if it fits. Logos. Self-logos. Oh, disposition. Mind. Or self-mind. That's interesting. These two fit, meaning we can see at the end of his life, we're going to see, did Socrates master this and this? And finally, what's our goal? Well, the goal is the oneself. But that was just a hypothesis in Parmenides. It was a logical explanation. I mean, the highest, the excellence of language, using all of the ideas that are of Zeno, all of the ideas of being, the highest ideas, the primary ideas. Everything you ever see is going to be a whole or a part. It's going to be at emotional rest. It's going to be same as something and different than something. It's going to be like something or unlike something. It's going to have a beginning, middle, and end. It's going to have a limit or it's going to be unlimited. Like numbers are unlimited. Everything. This is the highest use or the excellence of language. So what? Well, he used that excellence of language to explain the oneself through a dialectic. Question and answer, back and forth. Giving us a question. What would it be like to make it ours if we returned to the dialectic on the oneself? We returned to Delos over and over. If we spent our time talking about this, talking about the self-logos, as he said. What's the quote? Talking logosing about self. Myself and with someone else. What we're doing. If you did that, if you made it yours, and if you could therefore give a exact account, this thing that's been repeated 4 times at least already. If you've made it yours, you were present with it, you did it over and over, returned to it with your friends, so that you made it yours, you could give an exact account, what would happen? What happens to you as a human being? If we got the first hypothesis and now we're jumping to the end of the life of someone who maybe wasn't a dummy and listened, unlike Aristotle, who became one of the 30 tyrants, unlike Cephalus, who's the guy at the start of the Parmenides who's asking for an account, he reappears in the Republic, and you can check that out if you want to see what kind of a person he became. But for someone like Socrates, who maybe did listen, what would happen? What would happen if you mastered the logos, mastered the state of mind, being, the levels of states of mind in psychic development, in evolution of the psyche, of the soul? What would it be like to be the one self? to make the first hypothesis that is from Parmenides, of Parmenides, make it yours. Make it your hypothesis of yourself from yourself. So this was the introduction. When Parmenides gave his hypothesis, he says, I'm playing a reality-based game. Philosophy is a game that you play with friends, but it's a true one. It's the reality-based one. It's not a myth like a video game or a hero's journey or Harry Potter or Luke Skywalker or Theseus. It's the real thing, but it's still a game. They call it the Noblest game, by the way. We play a reality-based game, and I must begin from myself and my hypothesis of myself. He's made it his. He's speaking from himself. It's present with him. And it's of himself. That's what he's spending his time talking about. What? Talking about the self. Just like what Phaedo is saying he does. Oh, I want to spend my time talking about self. And hypothesizing about the oneself. And also whether one is or if it's not. Throw those in there as well. Why not? So our question is, what happens if you did it? What if you became like Parmenides? What if Socrates lived his life in that way? And it's Socrates. I mean, if anyone, what was the quote? He's going to fare well if anyone else had. If ever yet anyone else had. If ever yet anyone else would have mastered philosophy, take heed of his philosophical teacher, done the work and doing the exercises on the dialectic, spent his time returning to this logos of the one, self-logos of the oneself, as we are doing over and over again. Living that kind of a life, if anyone would have done that with integrity or excellence, if anyone would have, it would be Socrates. Our question is, what happens at the end? And maybe we've got a clue. Maybe in this introduction, we're getting a bit of a clue, a bit of a heads up. You know what it makes you? When you do the self-logos, return to it over and over again and apply it to yourself so it's yours, it affects your state of mind, you've integrated it. The oneself, how does that? What's that? What's the being of the oneself? Maybe you are like a great daemon. So our question is, what the heck would it mean to be a great daemon? Seeing as we can recognize a hidden puzzle. Those are the best ones, by the way. I use Christopher Nolan as an example because I don't know a lot of film directors who do it. There are some, but I think he does it well in some of his movies. The questions that aren't explicit that you have to discover for yourself are the better ones. This one we've discovered, the self-triad of self-logos, mind, self-mind, and oneself. That fits right here. So giving us the question, what the heck is a good daemon? Or what would it be like to master philosophy the way Parmenides has done and maybe Socrates has done? So, what is being like what's the text say? Good daemon. This is a big one for us. The end of Socrates' life. If he is the model of, even today, even though the West has gone off the Socratic tradition and gone into the physical world, like they've fallen into Socrates' problem that he had as a 19-year-old at the start of his life, because of the forces of history and the ignorance of human beings, especially those in power. They killed the philosophers at a certain time at the beginning of the Dark Ages, and we went down that terrible, terrible period of history where it was based on ignorance and believing other people, believing authorities. not understanding for yourself, not developing the logos, not even being able to read the text yourself, which is crazy, not even written in a language you speak, all of that. Even after all that, we still recognize Socrates as the greatest philosopher ever. Even if most people don't quite understand why, there's something about him that we can recognize. This question, what is it like being a good daemon, is another word of saying, what's it like to have lived your life and have reached this in philosophy? So it's a big question for us. Okay, for me at least, being present was a wonderful experience. But while being present at the death of that man, I did not feel pity as expected. That's another question. Pity. How does pity play a role? As expected, for the man appeared like a great daemon to me, O Socrates, both in his disposition and logos, since he met his end fearlessly and nobly, so that it occurred to me that neither in that place of Hades where he was he going to be without divine providence, but that there also he would fare well upon arriving, if ever yet anyone else had. Oh, what a clumsy way of talking. Surely, for all these reasons, because of the, translating it from Greek to English, it's more simple and efficient in the Greek. We need to learn Greek, by the way. A lot of people learn French at school. We should learn ancient Greek. Surely for all these reasons, I had no feeling of pity. Again, repetition. Such as would seem natural to my present sorrow, nor in turn any pleasure. Okay, it's a question. Well, it's a duad at least. We've got pity and pleasure. Pity and pleasure. Such as would seem natural to my present sorrow. Okay. So we have sorrow. So we have sorrow or pity. These two are together. Since we were engaged in philosophy, just as we had been accustomed to do. Okay, so philosophy. And we had been accustomed. Since we engage in philosophy just as we had been accustomed to do, for indeed the logos were of that sort. Oh, that's the logos he's doing. But what an exclusively strange experience, again the idea of experience, came over me. An unusual mixture sprung from both pleasure and pain. So we had sorrow and pleasure. Now we have pleasure and pain, blended together at the same time, by taking to heart that presently that was about to come to an end. A lot there, okay? So we've got pleasure and sorrow and pity, philosophy, accustomed, and the logos. Philosophy, accustomed, logos, sorrow, pity, pleasure, and also pain. We also have an experience, a strange experience. So experience. How we recognize experience is one of our questions. Here we go. The very second one. Experiencing yourself. sharing in what's important yourself. So experience is significant. Oh, and 22, he had a wonderful experience. What's that? Oh, and by the way, being present gave him the wonderful experience. Okay, so experience, strange experience, an unusual mixture of pleasure and pain. Unusual mixture of both pleasure and pain. Another triad. Blended together at the same time by taking to heart that presently that was about to come to the end. And again, present. Present is significant all the way through, presently. And nearly all those present, again, were affected in a similar way. On the one hand, sometimes laughing, and on the other hand, sometimes weeping. But especially one of us, Apollodorus. Will you know the man in the way of self? There's a question for us. This one I'm not going to take a note on, because this is a more of an obvious question. Like it's a character question. So, hey, you know the guy Apollodorus. Oh yeah, I know him. I know his way. So, like that's an easy one to keep in mind. We'd have to take a special note. If we did, it would be, oh, what's the significance of Apollodorus? What's his way? Let's add it. Why not? Our list is pretty long. Hey, the more we have on the list, the more possibility for insights we have when we apply our sewing needle of infinite truths and weave things together. We can weave insights, we can weave key terms, we can weave repeated terms, we can weave key themes or repeated terms as themes, we can weave questions, we can weave hypotheses, we can weave things in our skill trees. So this is a question that can be one of the things we can weave together. And that's how you read. That's how you read Plato. What was it? Oh yeah. The Way of Self of Apollodorus. What does it say? It says, you know the man and the way of self. So we've got Apollodorus. Apollodorus. D-O-R-O-S. And his the man and the way of self. Man and way of self. Okay, so one of our questions. It's a promise. Hey, you know the Apollodorus, the man and the way of self? Oh yeah, well we don't yet. We should, if it's a good, well-written book. How could I not? Thus accordingly that man was altogether in this condition, and self, for my part, was perturbed in 4 ways, and so were the others. Now, I don't see 4 ways in the Greek. We have this word here. So we're going to... Jarvis, are you there?
I'm here to assist you with a variety of tasks as best I can.
I need you to go out from this prison that we're in with Socrates reading this text and to space, because we need to access the internet, and that's not going to be around for another 2,500 years. So could you please bring up the internet so we can check this word?
Importing all preferences from home interface.
Okay, half there.
Systems are now fully operational.
Thank you, Jarvis. Jarvis is my AI. Does my computers. I got him from Tony Stark. This is the word. Oh my goodness. Etataragmin. Etataragmin. Okay, now we paste it in our dictionary. Oof. Trouble the mind, agitated, disturbed. So we get the definition. I don't know if it's in there somewhere. Past tense, blah, 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 blah. Troubling. So we also look for other passages in Plato if we like. Oh, here we go. Plato, the Republic. Oh, and the Phaedo. This resource is fantastic. Thank you, Jarvis, for hooking me up with this resource.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Thank you for that contribution. So, we're not there yet, but this is a section of the Phaedo that we're in. Any of the other senses along with his thinking, but who employs pure absolute reason in his attempt to search out the pure absolute essence of things. Ooh. And who removes himself so far as possible from eyes and ears and in a word from his whole body. Wow. Okay. Reason. Let's bring up the Greek. Let's see if it's logos. This is really cool. We can load the Greek at the same time. That word there. Logio. That's the logos. So, use absolute reason. So the excellence of logos in your attempt to search out the pure essence of things. Now, essence we can recognize is the way they used to translate ousia. Again, one of the great betrayals of philosophy is essence and not ousia. Why? Because essence only has the lesser meaning, the essence of something. But ousia is not just the essence of something, it's the essence of pure mind. It's the realm of being. That's ousia. But it's also the eye of the soul that allows us to access it. That's what makes man's quest a spiritual quest. We are on a spiritual quest. It's a consciousness quest. We have states of mind. We want to get better ones. Better what? Dispositions. And how? Through the logos. So, essence we can recognize as ousia. Probably going to be in the Greek somewhere, but my Greek isn't amazing. We'll get to it, by the way, when we get to 66a. It removes himself so far as possible from his eyes and ears, and in a word, his whole body, because he feels that companionship disturbs the soul. There's our word, disturbs the soul, and hinders it from attaining truth and wisdom. Well, that's what we want. Okay, so being separate from the body helps us. Having companionship with our senses, our eyes and ears and our body, disturbs the soul and hinders it from attaining truth and wisdom. Is not the man, Simmias, if anyone, to attain the knowledge of reality. Okay, big one, all right? We want to know the knowledge. We want to know reality. We recognize knowledge is something to do with being, or reality, the ultimate disposition, the best state of mind, is the knowledge of reality. But it can be difficult if we are, let's zoom in so we can see it, have companionship with our physical senses. So hopefully this is a foreshadowing of something that Socrates is going to help us with. The yoga or the method that we can separate to whatever level we can from our physical senses so that we're not disturbed and we can pursue logos in an attempt to find the ousia so that we can reach truth and wisdom and attain to the knowledge of reality. What a sentence. I mean, holy crap. So that's a sentence and a half. I mean, all of the heavy hitters are in that sentence. It's like a dream team of philosophical ideas and goals and relationships. Holy crap. What do you say, Owen?
Wow.
Yeah. It's also in the Republic. Oh, we want to focus on the English because we are not yet taught ancient Greek at school. Isn't that right, Jarvis?
I'm here to assist you with a variety of tasks as best I can.
Okay. Okay, you say truly. That, then, I said, was what I had in mind. A class of idle and spendthrift men. The most enterprising and vigorous portion being leaders and less manly spirits followers. Ugh. The most... it's hard to read in English. The most enterprising and vigorous portion being leaders and the less manly spirits followers. We are likening them to drones, some equipped with stings and others stingless. And rightly too. These two kinds, then, I said, when they arise in any state, can create a disturbance, like that produced in the body by phlegm and gall. Okay, so this word is disturbance. And he uses it in the Republic to talk about the sort of men that can arise in a state. In the Republic, the state is a metaphor for the soul. So he says, often we have leaders who are idle and spendthrift. They're cheap and they're not doing stuff. Some have stings and others stingless. But if they arise in our state or our soul, it creates a disturbance, like we have from phlegm. Okay, so he talks about a character or a disposition. In the Republic, the characters of men are types of disposition that can happen, because the whole Republic is people asking Socrates, "Hey, I'm interested in the excellence of the soul, justice, and can you please explain that to us in a way where having the excellence of the soul will give some sort of spiritual benefit to us, greater even than any rewards or punishment that you could have by appearing to be just." A lot of people in our world appear to be just, but they're scammers. And they have a lot of wealth, and they have a lot of women's, and they have a lot of fame. And it even appears that the gods love them. Sometimes they have mega churches. But show us that not for those reasons, but for another reason, it's good to have a just, well-ordered soul. So he goes, okay, it's hard to see the soul. It's quite difficult to see, but we can look at it through a magnifying glass using the analogy to a whole city. And here he talks about kinds of people that can arise that can create a disturbance in your soul. So again, this word disturbance. So we've got two sections from this here, from Plato, where the same word is used, talking about a disturbance. Even in this text, he says, oh, by the way, the whole reason we want to separate our soul from our body is so we can do philosophy without disturbance. Right? The thing, where's our quotes? Apply the logos in the excellent way through the dialectic to the self-ideas, the ousia, self-ousia. So we've got a quote where he talks about self-ousia that we have already from the Phaedo in our back pocket. Here we go. Self-ousia. It's in that one. Each idea has self-ousia according to self, and we have to apply our greatest understanding to it. But also, we have this one from Socrates. Solve the following puzzle about this ousia self that is woven together into the idea selves. Demonstrate in detail about the ideas which we grasp by the activity of the logos. So, at Socrates' first question in his philosophical journey is, by the way, I recognize that the idea selves in being not concepts, the idea selves, are made of ousia. That's the word that we sometimes mistranslate as essence. Sure, it's the essence of them, but there's more involved in the word ousia. It's woven into the idea selves. And how do we understand them? How do we grasp the ideas or behold them in our own disposition? Through the logos. All right, so he's saying, this is what I want. And now we read a quote from the Phaedo where he says, oh, by the way, others, you have to do it too. So we read a quote from Parmenides saying, oh, more admiration will be given to those who can help others in the same way. Socrates seemed to be doing that from that quote. The very thing he asked to be able to do, he's telling someone else, oh, you need to do this too. Do what? Use the excellence of the logos to grasp the ousia of the ideas and being. It's going to be made easier if you can separate from your body, so you can have knowledge of truth and reality. So, interesting, cool. What's the exact quote? Attaining truth and wisdom, attain the knowledge of reality. Pretty cool. Because that whole, in the Parmenides, he was also talking about what knowledge is as well. Because Parmenides, by the way, all of those ideas we've been talking about, beauty itself, justice itself, goodness, likeness, oneness, they're all knowledge. It's all one thing. It's all knowledge. Different intellectually distinguishable aspects, but it's all the one experience, one disposition. Why do we keep going back to the word disposition? Because we have this. Good thing we did this. What does he say? Use the logos. Apply it to the ousia. Make it yours, disposition. And then maybe, when it is yours, the great daemon, is that the one self? Right. So, we have a question. Why is this translated as perturbed in 4 ways? Okay, my Greek was not good enough yet to see if there was a reason why etadaragmin was is to do with 4. This last part is disturbed, so maybe eta means 4. Anyway, disturbed. This is significant because it would have 4 ways. It's a number, which means it could be a tetrad, a quadrad, triad, a tetrad skill tree. So maybe there are 4 ways of being disturbed. Or it could just be disturbed. I think maybe we'll keep this in the back of our minds. If we come across a 4 ways of being disturbed, then we can go back to the beginning and have a look at this. Otherwise, he was just disturbed. A good thing we went on that hunt, because we got that cool quote from the Republic, and especially from this one. Who then, O Phaedo, were those who happened to be present again? Of the countrymen present, we have our list of 8. This pair, 1, 2, 3, 4 pairs. 8. Plato was ill. Were some foreigners present? Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Who else were there present? No. Was anyone else present? I think these were all as present. Okay. Again, present. So present is huge. So could be what we could infer our own questions from that. Like, how would you have the excellence of being present? To be completely present in the moment, what would that be like? We know that our eyes operate like a cinema. We take snapshots. Like our eyes work like 60 or 32 times per second or something. We take snapshots. Which means we have the kind of illusion of movement. But what if we were to be completely present in the gap? What would that be like? Super present, or the excellence of present. If our senses work through time in that way, would being present in the ultimate way somehow separate us from our body in the way that was talked about? Dunno. Put them in your question sack. Create your own. If you have any good questions about present, share them in the chat. It might help others. Or it'd be fun just to talk about, I had this idea about presentness that I can carry with me. Maybe you can carry it too. Help each other. We are adventurers.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
There we go. So, what's the significance of 4 pairs, or 8 and 5? Four pairs, or 8. No. Let's go green. 8 plus 5, or that gives us 13. And also, this relates to OREIGN. Foreigners or natives. Countrymen. What's the significance of that? I will try to describe in detail to thee everything from the beginning. For indeed on the previous days, both others and I were always in the habit of visiting with Socrates. Now the story starts. Got a whole bunch of promises, a whole bunch of questions, a whole bunch of IOUs. Now, we read this last time. What are we doing? Are we wasting our time? Is there a better way of spending our present other than going through the self logos again, ourselves and with friends? Phaedo doesn't think so. Was it worth it? Was it a wonderful experience? Was it painful? Was it pleasurable? Was it kind of a strange mix of both in a weird way? It did take some work, but it was kind of worth it. It did feel like we're doing something important and meaningful. I will describe everything in detail from the beginning. Did we just go through it in detail? How many times has this idea of doing things in detail come up? Many times, all right? Does this justify what we've just done? We went through what we read last time, but we did it in detail and in a specific kind of way. As a hero adventurer, as a philosopher, as the archetype of the hero adventurer, right? We look for questions, we look for hypotheses, we put them in our sacks. We used our skill trees. We used our weapon, the sewing needle of infinite truths, Sinit. We reflected, we did Osea, we went back to the start and did it again. Is this just vindicating what we did? Describing it in detail? Everything from the beginning. Did we go back to the beginning and start again? Yes. Vindication. Vindication, my man. Yeah. Okay. Also, do we talk about having to repeat the journey every year? The journey of what? Apollo. Philosophy. Back and forth to Delos and back home. Right? Every year. Did we go back? And what happens? Have we purified ourselves in some way? Have we benefited in some divine way, as though a daemon was talking to us? Has our logos and our disposition benefited? Maybe. We'll have to find out. If so, could we say that benefit of going through it in this way in great detail, could we say that has purified our soul in some way? In order to go through it again, we had to sort of get into the mind, get into reading, get into wondering, get into questions, all of these adventurer activities have their analogy that we can see through abduction with a hero, with an adventurer, with an RPG video game character. And then we're using that to mythologize what we're doing. But the difference is none of it's in the physical world. I mean, there's reading and there's meeting up with your friends and going through this over and over again, or clicking like and subscribe or whatever. But really, it's of the mind. That's the difference between the swinging a two-handed axe or a lightsaber or this. This is of the spirit, of the soul, of the mind. We're separating from our physical senses. Is this purifying ourselves in that kind of a way? If so, good for us. So, on that note, we see this next part begins. We gathered together at the dawn of the court of the trial which took place, which we were in a habit of doing. So they meet up on the same time, they gather together. They're accustomed to do it. We saw that over here, right? This strange feeling that is kind of different from normal pleasure and pains, or fears, or sorrows, or pities. Philosophy, accustomed, logos. So now we have a question for our next read-along podcast. Will we see everything we just pulled out for ourselves, all of these gems of insight and wisdom that we pulled out for ourselves, insight and connections? Will we see them that we pulled out just from the beginning, the opening, the introduction? They haven't even started the story yet. Will we see them play out in time with characters? Will we see someone becoming accustomed to some sort of philosophy through logos in the story that's to unfold with the characters? So everything we saw and we pulled together from this, just the beginning. Isn't that so much? It's amazing to me how much is in this, how many gems, how much gold is in this there hills, right? But we have a question. Can we see all of those things, those themes, those key terms, those relationships, those goals, the answers to these questions play out mythologically in the characters that will unfold in the story? And as a teaser or a taster, we can see here, we gathered together at the dawn at the court. Each day we were in the habit of waiting around, spending time discussing things with each other. Each day, returning to the same place. To what? Gather together. This word is repeated through the beginning. Gathering ourselves together. Gather ourselves together. We have to collect ourselves together in the dialectic, by the way. Let's have the quote from Parmenides. Collect thyself together by exercising more in that way that appears useless to the many. What? Dialectic, returning to have the logos with your friends about the self, and is called by them empty talk, for if you do not, while you are still young, the truth will elude you. This was said to Socrates at the beginning of his philosophical journey, and now we're seeing this happen, be represented mythologically in the drama of the story itself. So it's the logos given to us in the opening, given to us in the questions, given to us in the introduction, and also repeated on a different level in time, in drama, in the time between the start of them meeting up and meeting Socrates, like the time we have between our birth and our death. That's the past, and we're going somewhere in the future. We have a present here. Our question is, how do we spend our time? Like Socrates? Is that way that we should be spending our time going to be mythologized in the characters like we're seeing here, meeting up, returning again at the same time with their friends to discuss ideas? Can we see the message of philosophy that's being given to us from Socrates and Plato through time? Can we see that message communicated to us in many ways? Why? Because it's so important. how we spend our time, how we spend our present. What should we be doing while we're here? And how can we know where we're going or where we came from? So that we can spend our time here, our present, in the greatest way. In what ways? In the greatest, with the greatest pleasure. Wonderful experience here. Giving us the greatest pleasure to remember Socrates as we're doing. So that's what we're going to take with us. Can we see all of our insights that we've gained so far play out like a magnifying glass? We talked about the Republic blowing up the soul to a city. Now we're blowing up all these insights and these questions and these hypotheses that we have, blowing them up to a narrative. Blowing them up until putting them in time, because the ideas are not in time. We might apprehend them. We might take time in our life to apprehend them. That might be the learning of philosophy. And it might be fun when there's a harmony and a rhythm in the music of philosophy that we can dig. When we see that, when we make these connections, maybe it becomes beautiful for us and enlivens us and inspires us. By the way, that's Apollo leading into Aphrodite, which culminates in Hermes. That was a triad we got last time. That might be how we're supposed to spend our time. And we're going to keep an open mind about that because we might see it in the text. So while there is that harmony and rhythm and pace through which we gain those insights like Aphrodite that leads to the dialectic, the ideas themselves are not in time. I have them, you have them, Socrates have them, Plato has them, maybe Phaedo will have them, maybe Socrates will have them. In other words, they're not limited by time and space. They're outside of time. So we have these ideas and insights outside of time, but our question that we're taking with us is, can we see them also communicated or represented through art, through mythology, in the character and the story and the drama that's going to follow in the rest of the text? What a good question to take with us. What do you think, Owen?
Wow.
Really?
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Okay. On that note, I hope you're questioning. I hope you're wondering. I hope you've given birth to some questions yourself. Share them in the chat if you have any questions, or you want to share your questions with others that they may benefit, because we are spending our time returning to the Logos and remembering Socrates again and again so that we can purify ourselves and with friends. Thank you for joining me. See you next time.